early 2000s when I was still a teenager, starting to really get into vintage keyboards. My dad happened to be living here in Los Angeles at the time. He took me and my brother to the local guitar center out here, and there was this little red keyboard. I felt like I was a better musician playing that keyboard just right out of the box. I felt like I had faster fingers, could play cooler, more complex lines. I fell in love with it. Hi, my name is Casey Harris. I'm the keyboardist from X Ambassadors, and I'm here with my friends at Guitarcenter at Gold Digger Sound, and we're about to delve into this keyboard in front of me, the Nord Stage 4, that I am very excited to get into. Instead of going to college, I went to technical school to learn how to tune pianos so that I could just skip to the straight making a living part and be a struggling artist. Through that and through owning a bunch of vintage keyboards, I've gotten really familiar with the ins and outs and quirks of real mechanical instruments. And it's something that I still treasure and love. But obviously the problem with those real instruments is they are real bulky, real heavy, and real unreliable considering how old they are. So it makes a lot more sense on every front to use an emulation. The other thing that really sold me on the Nords was that just like those vintage mechanical keyboards, it was all tactile. It's all buttons and knobs. You could operate this keyboard entirely without the main screen, and which is honestly what I do most of the time with my visual impairment. That is one of the few features that no other keyboard brand has. They might have good quality vintage sounds, but that tactile physicality is what makes these Nord keyboards not only sound great, but also, bring a little bit of that vintage keyboard experience. I've honestly now been using the Nord Stage 2 for the past 13 years on the road, and it's endured crazy, crazy weather conditions, being dropped, being crushed by other gear, and it still works, and it still sounds amazing. The sound quality of it and the sheer programmability of it was what kept me coming back. And now I'm lucky enough to have the Nord Stage 4, and it's really, really awesome. There's a lot of big differences, honestly, between this and the 2. A lot of more subtle differences, too. And it's really even the subtle differences are kind of the most game-changing ones. So I'm going to go through here a couple of the new features on this keyboard that I'm really loving, and just sort of go through my sound design process for making, live patches for the band and that sort of thing. So me and the other guys in the band, we're really into imperfect sounds, I guess. Sounds where you can hear quirks, sounds where, things don't sound pristine necessarily, where you can hear the space, you can hear the creak of the bench, And it's hard to get that on a digital piano, obviously, because you're just dealing with what's been pre-sampled. But one of the things that I've loved about Nords, and one of the things I used so much on the Stage 2, are their upright piano sounds, which have a lot of character and nuance to them. And they've always sounded really nice. One of the things I love, though, about this Stage 4 versus the Stage 2 is the piano section's been totally revamped here. And there's a couple of new controls. The one that immediately jumped out to me is the unison button, which you could sort of try to cheat this on the Stage 2, but it is exponentially better here, where I'll give an example. You can play just a nice piano sound, a nice pristine, beautiful grand piano, sounds perfect, sounds flawless. And that's great, but for someone who likes a little bit of character, a little bit of a flaw, for lack of a better word, in the sound, there's this unison button where it's essentially adding doubles of the sound you've already got. But the effect, I'll turn it on full strength so you can really hear it, is... And here's, just for contrast, here's it off and on full. And it's almost like a chorus sound. Most pianos in the world are not perfectly in tune when you sit down to play them. And so most of them have this sort of slightly phasey, chorusy, swirling feel. This unison button lets you immediately dial in that little bit of detuning, especially on the upright sounds. It's really turns, a fairly, static upright sound like that into, a living room upright. Already sounds like you're sitting in the living room playing, someone's piano. And that's been a huge difference. There are a few other parts of the piano section that are a big change from the stage 2. The timbre button has really been super useful. I used to have to spend ages tweaking the EQ section on a piano just to get it to sound right. And here, say I pick something like the felt upright, which I love the sound of. It's very rich and nice, but a little too dark, honestly. And with this timbre button, you can just immediately, you can bring in a little more highs just with a few clicks. And that's been unbelievably helpful as far as, the speed of which I can craft tones and just get pianos that sound, a little quirky, a little odd, which is the way I like them. One of the first things I did after I'd gotten the keyboard and, gotten a little familiar with it was to start building the sounds that I use live for the band. And luckily, even though there's some major control panel changes and architectural changes, one of the things that I love about these keyboards and one of the reasons I stick with them is that it was relatively straightforward for me to recreate all the sounds that I needed. And then, of course, there were a few extra little bells and whistles and nuances that I was very pleasantly surprised to add to the sounds, like that saturation quality. And even there are a few extra delay options that are a lot cooler than what I used to have. A lot of the times with these Nord products, I won't even bother with the presets because it's so easy just to build sounds from scratch using the controls. I'll bring up a blank new slot and work from there. They almost always start with just a regular old grand piano sound, which is beautiful sounding. This is the Grand Lady, I think, which is probably my favorite grand piano sound on the Nord. And then I'll just ask myself what the song needs. And for a song like Renegades, when we originally recorded it, it was mostly Rhodes that I was doing on there. So I'd switch over to, a Rhodes sound. That's a nice Rhodes sound there, but it's not as punchy and as bitey as the sound that I used originally. So and that's a little closer. I think that's the Rhodes 2. But again, not exactly the sound I'm going for. So a lot of the times on the Nord, I'll use pretty much exclusively, anytime I have an electric piano sound going, I'll also have the amp section turned on and set to, like, usually the twin reverb sounds really good on Rhodes sounds. And one of the biggest differences I've noticed between the Stage 2 and the Stage 4 sonically is the quality of the saturation on the amp sims is really nice. If I'm just to show you a quick example, like, really beefy. And on the Stage 2, it was nice, but it would get a little digitally. This sounds like a real tube amp crunching, and it's awesome. I've been using the saturation a little more heavily on these sounds, honestly, than I did ever on the Stage 2. But, I'll bring something like that up, a Rhodes with maybe a little less saturation than that, starting to sound a little more like what I'm going for. And then for unsteady, I'd bring up a piano sound, obviously. I probably want a piano sound, like I said before, with a little bit of character. So I'd switch to an upright piano. Find something quirky, but not too strange. I'm not quite ready to go honky tonk with unsteady yet. But yeah, put a little unison on there. Put the timbre on to soften it up a little bit. And then one thing that I've really come to love on this stage 4 are the new reverbs, especially the new room reverb. And there it is, cranked all the way up. It sounds like you're in somebody's living room. It sounds like a living room with no furniture in it, honestly, but it sounds really good. And so I'll dial that back to maybe, around 10 or 11 o'clock. And it's a really realistic piano sound. All of a sudden I can, play unsteady without really changing how I originally played it, and it sounds brand new. One of the most crucial things about these Nord products, and one of the things I love so much, is that I can create these patches on my keyboard at home, spend hours painstakingly tweaking the tone, and then you can just create a backup of the entire keyboard. And then I come somewhere like here. This is not my keyboard, actually, but it has the exact same settings as my keyboard, and it is loaded up with all the same sounds, all the same presets, all the same piano samples as my keyboard at home. And that is unbelievably helpful as a touring musician when you sometimes have to fly to a gig and you can't bring your keyboard. It's really nice and really reassuring to know all I have to do is bring my computer and it's my exact keyboard from home, which is amazing. Another nice feature that I've really appreciated about the Stage 4 versus the Stage 2 is that split points now don't have to be a sharp cutoff. Whereas before, I had my Stage 2 before, I'd have, an octave layered to the highest notes on the roads to, just give it a little more oomph. And that would start abruptly at this key here. But now, if you listen as I go through, it adds that second layer in gradually as you go up towards the split point, which makes it so much more natural and seamless sounding. And then, of course, for things like where I have the bass split, you can keep it a sharp split if you need. Another thing I'd love to go over is the new synth section, and that combined with the new saturation and amp sections has really opened up a lot of possibilities. When I was making the Renegade sound for my Stage 2 back in the day, I couldn't make the bass sound to save my life on that keyboard. So I sampled in the original bass from the record. And it sounds cool, and it's really awesome that I can do that. But it's not very controllable, and it's kind of like if I happen to hit a note slightly, the entire timing of the sample is off, and it's a clumsy workaround. So one of the things that I was really excited to do on here was to try to recreate that sound using just the synth engine. And I think I did a pretty good job. Check this out. I almost think it sounds better. And that was just purely because of the rich thickness of this new synth section, combined especially with both the saturation over here, and then a cool feature, if you dive into the filter section, you can actually overdrive the various filters in the synth section on their own without even using the amp saturation. So I sort of combined those two to give this bass sound the deep beefiness that it has. So one of the features on the Stage 4 that I haven't really had much chance to use with the band yet is the new organ section, which is really, really cool and really appealing to me. As a guy who used to play a lot of Hammond organ in the band, we just sort of drifted away from that a little bit. This new section, again, like the pianos that I was talking about earlier, the saturation is just light years ahead of what it used to be. As you heard there, the Leslie's spinning up. And one of the other features I love about it is you can choose the mic placement on the Leslie. You could choose close or distant mic. Let's see if I can show if you can hear the difference here. That's distant mic. Here's with a close mic. So a lot more obvious, the horn rotor speed changing and that kind of thing. I think I probably will end up using close mic most of the time, but man, it's really amazing to have both those options. And then, of course, the most obvious feature, the biggest change between this and the Stage 2 or even the Stage 3 is they have the real physical drawbars on here. And baby, let me tell you how much they make me want to play organ sounds, man. It's like I've been dealing with the button system for so long that I got used to it, but it's just not the same as grabbing a handful of these and, pulling like a Mahavishnu style Jan Hammer, play a couple notes, put on the Leslie and really cool stuff you can do with physical drawbars that you just can't do with the buttons. It makes it inspiring to play, having another physical thing to tweak on the keyboard. I have a feeling I'll probably end up using this keyboard a lot more for recordings. Honestly, that organ sound is better than basically any software organ I've heard. And again, just the immediacy of being able to tweak sounds like that. I use soft synths all the time, but I'm a big time preset user because it is not easy for a blind guy to work those graphical interfaces. Whereas with something like this, I can dial the sounds exactly how I want in seconds. Now that I have this keyboard, which has slightly higher quality sounds and can store more variety of samples than my old keyboard could, it's most likely going to be my main axe. Aside from obviously my, real Rhodes and an upright piano, this is going to be the guy that I do most recordings on. And particularly in my home studio, I've been basically just using the Stage 2, and this is going to be a massive upgrade to that as far as my own personal recordings go. Because then I can set the sounds up on the keyboard, don't have to worry about the computer at all. All I have to do is hit the R button and go. Honestly, it's been so fun and exciting discovering all the new features on this keyboard and just planning out how I'm going to use it in the live set and all of the various changes and quality of life improvements that it's bringing to me live. And sonically, honestly, it's really amazing. It's subtle, but the quality of sounds and the quality of modulations that are available has really convinced me that I'm going to stick with hardware. Between the reliability of these Nords, I've never had one malfunction on me ever. It's always been other gear that's been breaking, but not the Nord. And then, man, they just sound really good. And then, of course, last but not least, it's so easy for me to program. When we're rehearsing for the next set or, the next tour, it tends to be pretty much we're all in the room working together and people are figuring out their parts and their sounds on the fly. So it is an absolute godsend to be able to just reach up and grab some controls and tweak some sounds real quick while someone else is messing with their guitar pedals or tuning drums or what have you. It is absolutely been a game changer. For as long as I've used Nords, And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why I don't foresee switching to any other brand anytime soon. This thing is a beast. So if you want to find out anything more about the Nord Stage 4, go to guitarcenter.com, call one of their expert gear advisors, or just pop in at your local GC and try one out yourself.